purposes of a conference?
I've only been to New York for the purposes of conference.
Oh, wow. So yeah, our experiences dovetail nicely.
Yeah. Well, you'll have a good team there with you in Chicago. I'm glad Hernando's going.
Yeah, that reminds me, I do my business card requests.
Oh yeah, you should do that sooner rather than later.
Will they mail them to me, or could they
Yeah.
just send them with Hernando?
It could either way. Yeah, either way.
It's a Google Drive sheet, right?
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. It's like a form. It's definitely in the new hire checklist if you search for that.
I'm not a new hire. Why would I do that?
Because all the tools and who you're supposed to bug about them are listed in there. It's great. Everyone thinks I know everything now, but I just checked the spreadsheet and I'm like, I don't know, go ask so-and-so.
Well, that's just like my parents assume I know everything about computers, but I just know how to Google the problem.
Ah.
I'm sure
like...
Daniel can relate. Family tech support, Daniel.
Oh, hi. I just dropped my wife out of the door with the dog, so no family time.
Windows XP is what my family still expects that I know how to fix. It's like, no.
Oh no, we are on the Mac track at the moment, so.
Great. So it looks like we have Kevin on here now too. Hi, Kevin. Good morning. Yeah, so we'll give it a few more minutes for folks to actually show up. I'm guessing it's actually going to be a smaller call today, which I think is great because that means there's more room for open forum and discussion. Great, and it looks like we have another folk that's joined us. So username Kaya Man. Hello, good morning. Okay. So yeah, for those of you joining us, I'm going to share the link to our community call agenda in the chat here. And if you want to enter your name and show that you're here, we also have a sign up for receiving a calendar invite on your Google Calendar. That way we can kind of get a feel for who's coming to these things. How do I get into the chat while also presenting? Okay. Okay. Great. Is this anyone's first time on our community call? Nope, you're all old pros. Great. Thanks for coming back. Okay, and we'll give it until, oh, it's only 9:57. Great. Yeah. There, we'll give it till about 10:03 to 10:04 and then get started.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from Brazil.
Hello. What's your name?
My name is Marco.
Nice to meet you, Marco. I'm Hannah.
Hi. How's it going, Marco?
I'm fine, thank you. Hi, Colin. Hi, Thibault. It's nice to meet you, to know your faces.
Nice.
Yeah. Where in Brazil are you?
Are you?
Yeah, saying where in Brazil are you, Marco?
I am at Vila Olímpia.
Oh, okay.
São Paulo.
Great. The Kong team will actually be heading down to Sao Paulo next month for AWS Summit Sao Paulo.
Oh, I'll be there.
Great. Yeah, come by the booth. Come say hi.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I woke up today with an email telling me that a package is on the mail with
good.
a t-shirt and stickers because I merged some PRs on master.
Great.
And I was so happy.
Good. Yeah, I can't wait for you to get that. I'm glad they're going.
I hope I can go there with the Kong t-shirt.
I hope so too. Oh, if so, I'd love to get some pictures of you in it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think I just saw your merge request. Like I was looking at the list, and you were the one that you made changes to the mesh distribution Kubernetes, I think. If I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember we were just going through that list yesterday before we sent out the shirt. So
I did a lot of things last month because I was in process of being hired by and I was talking a lot with Tommy and Rob, and Bruno is my friend, my personal friend.
Bruno's
He's from Brazil. He's from Brazil.
Yeah.
I met Claudio here also.
Nice. Well, looks like Declan has joined us as well, and I think one more person too, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Vishwas.
Me?
Yeah, go for it. Oops.
To just like what what I do.
Sure. Yeah. Where are you located? What do you do? How do you use Kong?
Yeah, I'm in São Paulo. I'm 41. 41 years old, and I am programming since I am 11, so it's 30 years so far. So I have been through everything you can possibly imagine. And in the last 8 years about working with startups. And now I am working with a startup. They call it here like an Uber for trucks, for heavy transportation. And the premise is very, very aggressive, but I don't know. It's a very difficult market to get into because the truckers, they don't have a lot of education and don't have are not used to use mobile app, and they already have a closed market. It's difficult to get into. And also Brazil is very, very big, and it's difficult to track the truckers or the country for the country. But I'm new at the company, 5 months there, and I am trying to get into a company called Kong.
Well, we hope Kong will help you in your vision. So. Right.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing. It looks like we have Jeremy on the call now too. Hey, Jeremy, how's it going?
Hey, folks. How are you?
Good.
Hey, Jeremy.
Doing well. Glad to hear from y'all.
Yeah, nice to see you. Glad you're on the call again. Yes. So it's about 10:04. So I know there's kind of a small number of us here, but that could be great for discussion. So I figure we can go ahead and start getting started. Welcome to May's community call. This time we will be focusing on the upcoming 1.2 and 1.3 releases. So first we have Kevin here, our developer advocate, who will give a quick sneak peek about some upcoming community initiatives, and Thibault will then go over 1.2 and 1.3, hopefully with a demo. But if there's anyone else that hasn't introduced themselves, please let's feel free to. We'd love to kind of hear who you are and how you use Kong.
Yeah, hi all. Hope you are able to hear me properly.
Mm-hmm.
This is Vishwas. I'm based out of Boston. I work on IoT space. One of the open source projects I'm exploring is Ajax Foundry, which is an edge platform written in the Go language. And there I come to know about the Kong because Ajax Foundry internally uses the Kong community edition. I'm just exploring that from the Ajax Foundry point of view, as well as from my internal projects. I'm planning to replace the Nginx with Kong, but mostly the two features I'm looking into it is one is certificate-based authentication in terms of the IoT scenarios, like all the devices having certificates, and Kong will play as a reverse proxy and TLS termination for that. Another feature maybe most interested into is GRPC support into Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Great. You're gonna like today's score.
Oh, good. That's awesome.
Thanks for joining us. Great. And then I also shared our agenda link in the chat here. So if you'd like to put yourself down as an attendee, and then if you would like a Gmail or a G-Calendar invite to the community call each month, please put your email address down and I'll make sure that you get that. And then with that, let's hand it on over to Kevin, who will talk a little bit about our community initiatives coming out.
Yeah, so you guys can hear me, right? Just checking. Cool. So as our community grows, we want to make sure there's some kind of leadership in place, both internally, so we have our core contributors and the Kong team that's constantly supporting the development of the open source software, but we also want to make sure there are kind of external like kind of a leadership there. So we're going to be announcing something called the Kong Champions, which are going to be sort of like Kong ambassadors that can be vocal members and recognized members of our community that help folks who want to contribute to use Kong or just have any questions when maybe if the internal team's not available, they'll always be there to support the community. And these are folks that have been using Kong and are very knowledgeable about how the use cases, how to integrate with existing systems, and just they've been helpful and large in the community for a while now. So we want to make sure we recognize them and support them for their ongoing efforts. And the second thing I kind of I think this is best for later discussion is we are looking to move kind of our community onto another platform. Right now we use Gitter, which isn't as effective, and we also have Kong Nation, but we want to kind of have a more live chat solution. So we're exploring options such as Spectrum and Slack. I think I've heard other communities using Discord. I think the reactive community uses Discord and they really like it. So I'd love to hear from the Kong community members, what kind of platforms they prefer and they like to use, so we can best support you guys moving forward. So yeah, this is something that I'll start talking to a lot of our community members about. Where would they like to interact with the internal team and just other community folks with. So yeah, so if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me about either one of these, or just to pop by and say hi, because I'd love to meet all the community folks.
Great. I'd also like to add that we are now distributing our 2019 contributor shirts. So if you make a contribution to Kong, if your PR is accepted, then you will have the opportunity to win a great shirt like this. And we hope to see you wearing it someday.
It is a new one compared to the old 2018.
Yeah, it's updated design.
Yeah.
Special just for you this year.
Yeah.
Great. All right, and with this, I'm going to hand this on over to Thibault and make him our presenter. So let's see here. Go here. And then host. Okay.
Great.
You're the host now.
Yeah. Thanks, Hannah.
Sorry, but we are not able to hear you. Are you on mute?
Yep, I can't hear either.
Oh, hey everybody. Can you hear us?
Yeah, you're back.
Great. Okay. So yeah. So I was thanking Hannah for switching it over to me, and then I was saying, sorry about that. So we're gonna look at the next upcoming Kong open source releases for the next few months. So recently we put out a Kong 1.1 release with declarative configuration and database-less modes. So we're gonna look now at Kong 1.2 and Kong 1.3 and what are the new improvements and features that we've been building, the team's been building over the last couple months or so. And some of those improvements, some of this work has started even before our 1.1 DB-less work, and some of it will improve 1.1 DB-less as well. Okay, so let's first have a look at Kong 1.2. In this release, which is slated for quite soon, actually, I will give estimates in a little bit. In this release, we're looking at a consolidation release on top of Kong 1.1, with, of course, a few additional features, because everybody loves having a few gems slip into those releases. So with 1.2, we're going to consolidate declarative configuration. We have helpful bug reports from the community and some early adopters who've been very active in using declarative configuration and reporting their usage and their issues. We also actually are migrating more and more of our test suite on top of DB-less. So as we do this, we sort of uncover any issues or optimizations we can do. And so talking about optimizations, in 1.2, beyond improving declarative configuration, we're looking at somewhat important performance improvements. We're looking at open sourcing new enterprise plugins that have been enterprise only for the last year and a half or so. We're looking at wildcard support for SNI matching. That will be part of our demo later. And hopefully we are going to merge recent contributions that improve connection management with Postgres. So we're trying to limit the number of concurrent connections open to the Postgres server. And we added some new memory statistics in the admin API that will help administrators get insight into the Kong memory, allocated memory from its Lua VM or shared memory dictionaries. Okay, so let's talk about the performance improvements that we have in the pipeline for your. So I want to distinguish two types of performance improvements we've been doing. So there is what I call the baseline improvements that will just improve performance of any process request. So technically improve latency and increase the number of TPS. So on the right here, I have some links to each of the PRs that relate to those changes, because those have already been merged. Unfortunately, I don't have numbers for you today. That is something that we'll put out before the release, but we have yet to run extensive tests that sort of encompass all of those changes that have been merged together in one bundle before actually running those tests versus Kong 1.1. So for baseline improvements, we have new plugin run loop heuristics. So what we mean by this is an optimized plugin run loop that will do a lot less CPU operations per request and a lot less of database queries that we know is often protected by the cache. So oftentimes the plugin run loop is going to ask the database for plugins that are configured, and oftentimes it will actually just hit the cache. And so no queries to the database will be made. But in this improvement, we actually optimize the run loop to know ahead of time what are the combinations of plugins that the run loop should check in the first place. So it doesn't check too many combinations. It doesn't check combinations of plugins that it knows it will not have to run. So all the details are in the PRs for those that are curious. And if you want to get to know how the Kong internals are built and how to contribute, those core those core pull requests, about the plugins run loop are very important, and we'd love to have more people knowledgeable about the internals of the plugins run loop and contribute to it. We also improved the general JIT of the plugins run loop. So as some of you may know, Kong actually is built on top of Lua JIT and not Lua. So Lua JIT stands for a just-in-time compiler version of the Lua standard Lua interpreter. And we just made updates to some of our hardcode path, as we like to refer to, that make sure that just runs faster and takes full advantage of the just-in-time abilities of Lua JIT. So we spend less time in interpreted mode and more time in JIT compiled mode. And then we have the P99 performance improvements. So what do we mean by this? So as I was referring to earlier, whenever a request whenever a request wants to retrieve a configuration value from the database, eventually the request will first go through the cache, and the cache may return a hit, and in that case we don't have to hit the database to open a connection and actually send the query over to the database. But sometimes it may be so that the value that we're looking for is not in the cache, and in those cases Kong will have to go all the way to the database, open a connection, maybe even open a TLS handshake with the database and run a query or a sequence of queries and eventually get pages of rows back and build some state, right? So what we're looking at in Kong 1.2 is improving the sync. So by P99 latency, what we mean is eventually those requests create a P99 tail, right? So you have sort of rather like really low latency, few milliseconds latency with standard Kong processing. But from time to time, when a request will have to hit the database, in those cases, you may have 20, 50, or 100 millisecond latency depending on what the operation is. So thanks to the feedback that was given to us by Jeremy, who is on the call now, and some of our engineers' work, we've been doing a lot of effort to try to improve that latency tail and make sure that any sort of request to the database is actually spun into an asynchronous job. So it doesn't affect the request path. So eventually the request will be processed, maybe with slightly out-of-date cache, but eventually the cache will be refreshed in the background and the next request will hit fresh cache value. So we're looking at asynchronously rebuilding the router, which so far has been the most expensive P99 latency impact. And we're looking at warming up database entities and DNS queries. So we have this new property called dbcache warmup entities that's in the Kong configuration file. And it gives you the possibility, the choice of warming up the database cache ahead of time. So, if you want to make sure that all of the plugins are already in memory so that the plugin run loop doesn't have to hit the database in the first place, you can do so with this property. And in fact, plugins is by default warm up in the 1.2 version of Kong, because dbcache warmup entities has those two values by default: services and plugins. And for services, we are reserving DNS records ahead of time as well. Oftentimes, the first few requests made to a Kong node are going to be somewhat slow and have a huge impact and show up in P99 latency tail. So with this property, we hope to reduce both database lookups and DNS queries so that they can be cached ahead of time, and we make sure that even the first request processed through Kong is a millisecond latency. Some of you may know, actually, this behavior is somewhat similar to what Nginx follows, where, you know, if you've used Nginx before, you have a resolver property, and any host name that needs to be resolved at runtime will be resolved via the internal resolver of Nginx that you can specify yourself. You can specify the name server yourself, and Nginx will query the name server. But if you hardcode a DNS name in the Nginx configuration, this host name will actually be resolved via the system resolver when Nginx starts. So that's an optimization that Nginx does. In this case, it's somewhat of a similar optimization as well that we're doing, although the resolver will still be the Kong resolver, which supports natively SRV records and a few etc hosts and etc resolve.conf with their configuration properties. And none of those three are supported by Nginx open source. Great. So next improvements or next big items on the release list for 1.2. The new open source plugins that are coming out of Kong Enterprise. So our goal, our strategy with Kong has always been to support the open source development thanks to the enterprise platform and the revenue and the growth that we experience via the enterprise platform that we refuel back into the open source and into the community. It's something that we take really close to our hearts. We really want to pay back to the open source community for all the wonderful technologies that we've been able to use. And we really have strong belief in the power and the strength of the community and of our open source approach. So as time moves forward, we always had this plan of taking the enterprise components out of the enterprise platform and open sourcing them and gifting them to the community. And in 1.2, we'll do, I think this is our first time that we're actually acting on that premise. So we're open sourcing the proxy cache plugin and the response transformer advanced plugin. Actually, I think it's request transformer advanced plugin. So the proxy cache plugin, some of you may have seen it before in our enterprise documentation or on the hub actually. It is only part currently of the enterprise platform, but this plugin allows you to cache HTTP requests, to cache HTTP responses based on the cache control headers. So it implements all the cache control specifications, and in the about to be released open source version allows you to cache those responses in the inside of the Kong's node memory. The enterprise version, we still have Redis support, but we think that the open source version, being able to leverage the Lua shared dict APIs and the shared memory zones and cache values inside of those memory zones will be extremely powerful for open source users. And in fact, the memory statistics that ship along with 1.2 will further help those open source users tuning your proxy cache configuration. We'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, so it's a very powerful plugin, implements many of the cache control headers and specifications. It provides some observability via a response headers that it injects, TTL configuration that can be overridden by clients with max age, max their request headers. It's fairly powerful. We've had a number of enterprise customers using this plugin for over a year now, and very satisfied customers so far. I've heard a lot of great feedback about this plugin, so we're really excited to ship it to the community. Where was I? Here. Okay. The request transformer advanced plugin. So let me. Where was I? Okay. So Request Transformer Advanced is an improved version of the Request Transformer plugin. And its main advantage is the ability to inject Lua variables that were extracted via, for example, the request path regex capture groups, or query string values or header values right into the upstream URL or upstream headers. So it has this sort of interpolation mechanism where you can directly inject a header via extracted from, or any value extracted from the request directly into an injected upstream request value property. So it allows, so it gets rid of those edge cases where you had to use, say, either build a custom plugin or use the Lua, the functions plugin to write your own Lua snippet that would do this for you. This allows you to achieve the same result just with the curl request. And so, like I said, is an improved version of the request transformer plugin that we have in the open source today. Okay. Next on the list. Oh yeah, so the Kong plugin proxy cache is already open source and available for you today. You can already use it if you know how to install custom plugins. And the request transformer advanced is still being worked on by our team right now. So please wait a few more days before we actually make it open source. But if you follow the Kong organization on GitHub, you will surely be notified whenever we open source it. And I will reiterate, both of those plugins ship bundled by default in Kong 1.2. Let's talk about another feature, one that I'm particularly excited about because I've seen this being a pain for many users of Kong in the past. And I'm glad to announce that in Kong 1.2, we'll ship Wildcard SNI matching. So just like the router supports wildcard host or dynamic SSL certificate serving, business logic now allows you to specify a wildcard SNI to match multiple SNI to the same certificate. So leftmost wildcard or rightmost wildcard both allow you to specify one server name identification and receive and match several the same certificate from all of those multiple from this single SNI. So technically what this means is if you have subdomains and you have your SSL certificate spanning all of those subdomains, you can avoid having to configure one SNI entity in Kong for each of your subdomains and actually have a single SNI entry for all of those subdomains. So we'll also demo this later on. Okay. Also coming in Kong 1.2 is a better Postgres connection management mechanism. So we've heard many users, sort of complain that oftentimes Kong will open too many connections to the database, and in the default Postgres configuration values sort of play against us here, where I think the default would be like 50 or 100. Number of concurrent clients. So Kong can be fairly, can consume a lot of Postgres connections. And some of the 1.2 improvements, specifically the heuristics for the plugin run loop, will consequently reduce that number of concurrent connection, even for the worst case scenarios. But we also have this new property called pgmax concurrent queries, which sets a maximum number of concurrent queries that can be executed at any given time. So this means that we won't have more than this number of concurrent clients per Nginx worker connected to the database at the same time. So with this property, you can finely tune the connection pool to Postgres and make sure that this number is never exceeded. The number of concurrent clients that you computed will never be exceeded. We still recommend eventually, and I'm sure some of you already use it in production or thought about it, we still recommend pgbouncer as a really healthy piece of your infrastructure in your production Kong cluster. We use it here in our Kong Cloud offering, in our Kong Cloud architecture. But for those of you who don't want to deploy pgbouncer or make sure that we optimize default Kong configuration for those use cases with a single Postgres server. We added this property in here. It's still not merged. The PR is 40551 and still up for reviews if anybody has any feedback or wants early usage of this new property. And finally, in Kong 1.2 as well, a new property in the status endpoint of the admin API called memory. And this property will include objects that represent the allocated memory from a given Kong node. We expose two types of different allocated memory. The worker Lua VMs, which are the garbage collector size of a given Lua VM running inside of each worker. And we expose the size, the capacity, and the allocated pages of each Lua shared dictionary. So Lua shared dictionary, just to reiterate if you're not familiar with it, are memory zones that are shared between all of the workers. And a Lua VM will be the Lua state running inside of a worker, and Lua being a garbage collected language. This memory is managed by the garbage collector, the Lua garbage collector. So each worker Lua VM will have its the PID of the worker that possesses this Lua VM and the size of the garbage collector. This size is updated every 10 seconds, and the Lua shared dictionary has the capacity of each of the configured shared memory zones, which can be very useful to debug a production instance. Make sure that your custom Nginx templates or custom rules that you added are taken in consideration. The capacity of the shared dictionary is actually the one that you want, and the allocated slabs, which is the pages allocated for this given memory zone. I want to stress out here that even if this number, the allocated slab, reaches the capacity, this doesn't mean that the shared dictionary is full, right? The shared dictionaries have a least recently used algorithm that makes sure to evict previous entries in order to allocate new ones, right? So this is how the database cache, for example, works. It can be full, but if we're evicting old entries that weren't queried in a long time, it's fine. We can actually inject more recent values in the cache and make sure that those are actually probably more useful for the current runtime. So we'll also demo this endpoint. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Kong 1.3 before we jump into timeline and demos. In Kong 1.3, we're looking at bumping our OpenResty/Nginx version. So the OpenResty latest release candidate, 1.15.8.1 RC2, is currently up for testing and will be promoted to a formal release this week if no major bugs are reported. So we're expecting to bump the underlying version for Kong as well. So this will bring many improvements to Kong as well, including support for ARM64 for OpenResty and LuaJIT, which is a huge piece in the native ARM64 support for Kong itself. We still have some of our dependencies that will need some more work before we can claim native ARM64 support. But this piece is a very important piece of the puzzle for this work, for Kong to eventually run natively on ARM64. We have, also due to the Nginx bump, the OpenResty work actually significant additional performance improvements. And here we're talking about the baseline improvements, just lower latency. In x86-64, OpenResty measured up to 10% performance improvements with this release. So we're really excited to bump our underlying Nginx version and OpenResty. On top of those, we also benefit from all the latest Nginx updates, right? New directives, upstream keep alive and upstream request keep alive properties, etc. So it's a release that many of the Kong team members have been testing. Some of them have contributed to this release as well. It's a project that Kong also actively maintains and has the knowledge and the expertise to move forward as well. So we're really excited to invest more resources in those technologies and make sure that we contribute as well to our runtime and our runtime benefits to us, to Kong as well. Okay, so this is what I guess I teased a few minutes ago. In Kong 1.3, and actually also thanks to the Nginx bump, we benefit from, we hope to ship our first version of GRPC proxying. The POC is actually already running and we're pretty happy with it. Thanks to the new Nginx GRPC proxy module, we can expect a new directive called GRPC pass that will allow Kong to natively proxy GRPC traffic, just as today it can proxy HTTP traffic. We are thinking of, we will make sure that this proxying works well with the Zipkin, so we have proper tracing from the get-go with our GRPC support. And we'll add eventually more and more plugins. We'll test more plugins and make sure that most of them are compatible with gRPC, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that Kong doesn't just proxy HTTP anymore. Kong proxies HTTP and gRPC, and eventually more protocols implemented on top of layer 4 binary protocols. And that is why we also added our stream listener property in Kong 1.0, and we're excited to build more and more support for more protocols parsing. So this, this is a pretty big milestone for Kong to cross that gRPC proxying milestone, and we're really excited about releasing this one. So like I said, it's still a work in progress. We do have a POC running. None of that is public right now, but we probably will be public in the next month or so and up for early testers to take a look at it. Also, finally, in Kong 1.3, I think the last feature I wanted to talk about was the upcoming support for native mutual TLS. So we do have mutual TLS capabilities already in Kong, but more on the service mesh aspect of Kong in the stream listener property, like I was saying, which supports raw TCP proxying. But here we're looking at native mutual TLS support in the gateway, in HTTP mode. So Kong will be able in Kong 1.3 to dynamically request a client certificate from a client and eventually verify these client certificates. So here Kong will act as a server for mutual TLS and make sure that it authenticates a downstream client. We will be building a mutual TLS authentication plugin as well, but more on that later. We have also planned a support for Kong to support mutual TLS as a client as well. So when Kong connects to an upstream, we want Kong to dynamically use a client certificate that you would have configured beforehand in your database or in your DBLS deployments. So Kong will be able to talk to multiple upstreams and use a different client certificate to connect to the different upstreams. So I want to stress out that as of today, both of those use cases are supported, but not dynamically. So if you have to configure mutual TLS today, you can only expect a single certificate authority to verify all of your clients, or you can only configure a single client certificate for Kong to connect to multiple upstreams. But with those capabilities, Kong will have dynamic mutual TLS support for both downstream and upstream. So multiple server certificates to verify a client TLS certificate, and multiple client certificate to connect to different upstreams, all configured via the admin API or via the config file. Okay. Okay, so time for some action, I guess, some demo time. So what I want to demo today is work that is already merged and ready to ship in Kong 1.2. So we'll demo dynamic, no, not dynamic mutual-TLS. We'll demo wildcard SNI matching, and we're going to look at the new memory statistics in the /status endpoint. Okay. So here I have Kong running. It does show Kong 1.1.2, but that's actually the next branch of the Kong repository. We haven't bumped the version number yet, but you know. So what I have here is a Kong environment with some properties, some services in my declarative configuration, and an example certificate and an example key. So we're going to go ahead and configure Kong according to my declarative configuration and use the new 1.1 capabilities of declarative configuration. And then we're going to configure this certificate. And we're going to request that Kong serves this certificate for any subdomain. So by specifying a wildcard SNI, we make connections to Kong with different subdomains, and our wildcard SNI will match all of those subdomains and make sure that we get this certificate instead of the default Kong certificate. Okay, so on the right here, I can start looking for logs. There will be interesting things in here. And what I'm going to do, so like I said, is import the my declarative configuration inside of my database. So here we go. And I'm going to start Kong. Perfect. So Kong started. And the first thing that I want you to notice is on the right here, we have some new logs logged at a notice level that indicate me, tell me that I have a warm-up cache. So all of the plugins entity are already in the cache, and all of the DNS entries have been resolved ahead of time. So I don't have any plugins configured, so that was a fairly quick operation. But I do have a DNS entry on the left here. You notice http://bin.org in my service, and we can see that this entry has been warmed up in 26 milliseconds, which is probably the amount of time it took for the DNS resolver to query that host name and get a record back. So those are the default properties, plugin and services, the default entities that are warmed up in Kong 1.1. And if I wanted to, I could specify more entities such as routes. Well, actually, route is a special case, but I could specify also custom entities, auth2 tokens, and make sure that those are warmed up inside of the cache, right? Okay, so I'm going to make a test request, make sure that this route, which is listening on the root path, actually proxies to http://org/anything. And perfect. So we went through Kong, we have the via header, and we got our response from HTTP bin in 9 milliseconds. Perfect. Okay, so now what we want is to configure this certificate. So some of you may already know how the admin API works, but it's a set of endpoints that allow us to dynamically configure Kong. So Kong runs, the admin API runs on port 8000 versus Kong's proxying runs on port 8000, listens on port 8000, but Kong's admin API is on port 8001. So I'm going to make a post request to 8001/certificates, and I'm going to upload a certificate, which is example cert.pem, and I'm going to also upload alongside it the private key. Okay. Perfect. So here I got, I just uploaded my certificate. We have more news on the certificate front as well. We've been exploring Vault integrations and other sort of integrations with certificate storage products and environments. So probably other news for other community codes in the future. But here, what I got is a certificate uploaded to Kong with this identifier. And I want to make sure that when I connect to Kong with a given SNI, I get served this certificate and not the Kong default certificate. So for this, I must post a new SNI. So I'm going to do this right now. Localhost 8001 SNIs, right? Great. So here in the name property of my SNI, I can specify this new wildcard support. If you try this in the version before Kong 1.1, before Kong 1.2, you're going to get an error because this character will not be accepted. And a certificate ID. Okay. Ooh. This is where I want this value. Okay. Yeah, we should be good. Yeah, that is my bad. Here we need a dot. Old habits die hard. Okay, great. So now I have configured an SNI on my certificate with a start.mydomain.com. So here, if I open a connection to Kong and I specify server name, so say www.mydomain.com, yep, connect, and I connect to the 8443 port of Kong. So what's going to happen here is that I'm going to connect to the port 8443. It's Kong's port listening for HTTPS connections. And I'm going to send an SNI value of www.mydomain.com. And here, I can see that I did get my domain as the common name for in the certificate that I was served. The certificate that I was presented was indeed the certificate that I uploaded. But what if I request with another subdomain? So say foo.mydomain.com. Perfect. I also got the same certificate. So I didn't have to configure two SNIs, one with foo.mydomain.com and one with www.mydomain.com. Now what happens if I request connect as mydomain.org? Here I get the default Kong certificate, the one that's automatically generated for you if you start a Kong node without specifying your own certificate. It's a self-signed certificate. So what I can do to address this issue is actually simply go to my manage my SNI's entities again, and I will specify mydomain.star instead. And now if I open the same connection with mydomain.org, I will be presented the certificate that I uploaded to Kong and not the default certificate again. Same goes if I connect to mydomain.fr, I actually get the custom certificate that I specified. Yes, and so this is Wildcard SNI matching coming in Kong 1.2, and we hope that it will help you manage your Kong clusters a little bit operationally. There has been a lot of previous complaints from users, pain points. Like I will have to configure, like I've seen from with my own eyes, like users configuring 20 SNI entities for all of their subdomains. So hopefully this will alleviate some of their pains. And the other endpoint that we can demonstrate will be on the admin API this time again. and is the status endpoint. Many of you know it. You've used it to monitor the health of a Kong node. It gets you the number of currently active connections. It gets you the state, the general health state of Kong, whether it's connected to the database or not. And since 1.2, in 1.2, I should say, it will also give you this new memory property that we mentioned with the configure Lua shared dictionary, the capacity of each dictionary, and the amount of memory currently allocated for that shared dictionary. It will also give you the garbage collector size of the Lua VMs. So I do have two worker processes running currently, 11.642 and 11.643. And I have really deep insight into the memory allocated by each of those workers, which is updated every 10 seconds. So that will be very helpful, not only for users of Kong to properly allocate resources and make sure that your pods, your containers, and your virtual memory, system resources and limits are properly configured. The database, your database cache is properly configured as well. It's properly sized. It's not necessarily like full. That maybe you have some leeway in there. But if it is full, don't worry about it. Like I said, you have an early eviction mechanism. And it will also help us, Kong developers, in bug reports and all of those day-to-day tasks to make sure that we can properly help you debug your instances and help you configure your instances properly, etc. If I want to, I can even specify a custom unit. So if I want the response to be in kilobytes, I get a kilobyte answer. And if I want to get raw bytes estimates and I want to build a dashboard with progress bars and whatever sort of UI, you can do this as well. So a very handy tool, a very handy new property in the status endpoint. We also hope to make sure we'll work on making those properties available via the Prometheus plugin as well, and eventually via logging plugins, so we can actually report those metrics and make sure that you get the best observability out of your Kong nodes. But for now, in 1.2, it will be part of the /status endpoint. Okay, so that's it for demo today. So we demoed the Wildcard SNI matching support and the new memory metrics of the status endpoint. So now I owe you some dates, I think, that I've been talking long enough and teasing all of those things and demoing some of them. So when do we expect to ship Kong 1.2? Our target date for a stable formal release will be end of May, end of this month. We hope to release a first release candidate very soon, and this estimate is an estimate for a formal release. So stay tuned, and hopefully when the release candidate is out, you will help us test it and maybe benchmark it, make sure that our performance improvements live up to the standards, and maybe be early adopters and report any issue you may see, which are always super helpful to us. Getting feedback on the release candidates is how we ship formal releases faster. And we've had an incredible run with our community so far. So we're really happy about that. And we hope that you'll continue to support us testing the release candidates. Kong 1.3, for this release, we're looking at a little bit more work. So like I said, GRPC support, a new Nginx version, and mutual TLS capabilities natively supported. So we're looking at sometime this summer, probably in July, but those are not formally, those are not like official release dates that we've actually put down in writing yet. That's just our current estimate. I want to stress out too that if you want to test any of those features today, anything that's merged in the next branch, which is currently in the shape for Kong 1.2, including the 2 features I demoed today, you can download those branches on the nightly build packages that are available on Bintray. And those are packages that every night we'll take the next branch, the upcoming next version of Kong, and build all of our release artifacts. So the Debian packages, RPMs, or if you want to build your own Docker images from those packages, you can do so as well. And you can test those new features early and report bugs even before we put the release candidate out, which is formidable. Yes, so that's what I had today.
We have some time for questions.
Yeah.
If anyone has some questions, comments, or just want to ask Thibault anything.
What other kind of resources are going to be in the pre-warm? So I know there's services and plugins. What other kind of Kong resources do you think will be useful in that pre-warm step in the init?
So the way we built it is we integrate with our database access layer, and any entity that is available as a DAO object, as a DAO instance, can be specified in this property file. So that includes consumers, API keys for the key auth plugin, or basic auth credentials from the basic auth plugin. So think about it as you have core entities, consumers, plugins, services, but you also have the plugins entities themselves. So a key auth plugin will create a table in the database with the key auth credentials, right? Those can also be pre-warmed and cached as well. So if you use a plugin, say OpenID Connect, you have a table of auth2 tokens. So if you specify auth2 tokens in the warm-up property, your clients connecting to Kong will include their tokens, right? But the token will not be queried to the database by Kong. It will already be warmed up in the cache. So I would advise to specify any entity from custom plugins that you may have configured. So the reason why we don't do it by default is that there is of course a trade-off, and the trade-off with the warm-up will be time to boot up a new Kong node, right? So the boot process will be a little slower, and eventually, if the size of the cache is not large enough to hold all of your entities, it will spill over. You will have some warning logs, and that's okay because, like I said, you have the LRU eviction mechanism, so Kong will still run just fine. It will just maybe not run with an optimized cache, right? So the advantage of a lazy loading cache is that you only cache what you actually will use, but you pay the first request, the cold cache price, right? So that's the trade-off.
Yeah, kind of a trade-off of bloat and performance, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, I noticed you specifically didn't mention routes. Is there like a special case with routes for why that's not in the pre-warm?
Yeah, and that's why earlier I even confused myself. So actually, routes are always queried as a whole by the Kong nodes because the router needs the whole route state to be able to be built, right? So when you update a route in Kong, we actually rebuild the router in its entirety, so by paginating over all of the routes. And that is why sometimes the P99 latency can be fairly high when you update routes at runtime, is because we have to do this process of paginating through all of the routes and rebuilding the router. And that is why the other performance improvements that you and Vanguard have been working on, which rebuilds this router in the background instead of on the request path.
Right.
The routes will actually never be queried individually. They will never be. They will always be queried with different requests, different queries that query entire pages of rows.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions, comments, concerns about what we've presented or anything else related to Kong? No. All right.
I hope this was insightful.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. So we do these calls on the second Tuesday of every month, and we're always looking for external presenters as well. So if you ever want to share how you use Kong, if you've written a plugin for it, please feel free to contact Kevin or I. I will drop both of our email addresses here in the chat. And then we also post the recordings of these online as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
please check out Kong Nation, discuss.konghq.com, and post any feature requests, questions, general questions about Kong plugins, about all the projects that are related to Kong, such as the Kubernetes Ingress Controller, and stay in touch with us. And like I said, if you want to give a try to the next branch, which contains all of the improvements for Kong 1.2, that is already available today on Beantrade for download on the nightly release packages.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.